Hello, everyone. Welcome to this first reveal of the CIE benchmarking bike share in 148 cities. Thank you to be here with us. You've been more than 440 to register, and you're as almost as numerous connected with us today. So we are very happy that bike sharing is having so much interest. So I will be moderating this session. I am Caroline from 15. We are a bike share provider. We provide bike sharing in about 30 cities in the world, and we are part of the bike share expert group, which is part of CIE. Probably you know CIE, but I will just remind you, Cycling Industries Europe is the united voice of cycling. It gathers the entire supply chain of bicycle from parts maker through bike share provider, operator, cycle logistic, online and financial services, infrastructure, tourism, and consultancy. And among them, we have this expert group dedicated to bike share that represent the world's leading operator and service provider who work together to shape the sector forward. This session is registered and we'll take questions at the end. So don't hesitate to ask your question in the chat, and we'll select a few of them at the end of the session. I am here surrounded with a very high-level panel to comment on that study. So I will introduce all of them, starting with the ladies. So we have here Isabelle van Door, who is the Deputy Head of Unit at DG Move from the European Commission. We also have Anna Utunen, who is an advisor at Climate Neutral Cities. We also have Andrea Lopez Azevedo, who is the lead of the Active Travel and Health Working Group at Police. And we also have three men, Christophe de Vogel, who is in charge of public mobility and especially working for bike share for the Brussels capital region. Christian Brink, who is the CEO of Urban Sharing, member of the bike share expert group and proudly sharing it. And also, of course, last but not least, Kevin Main, the CEO of Cycling Industries Europe. And I will start by turning to you, Kevin, because we all want to know what's inside that study and which are the cities that perform best in Europe in terms of bike sharing. I give you the floor.
Thanks very much for that introduction. This session was called Shared Ambition, and I put it as it's got ambition, it's got data, it's got benchmarking. For those who are into these subjects, I'm going to do something that would probably take 40 minutes, and I promise to do it in under 10. So hold your breath. It's going to be a ride. Firstly, let's just talk about ambition. Cycling, not my words, Commission's words. Huge potential for, in climate change, other issues, and therefore written into so many European Union policies. We just mention a few. We have high hopes next week that a European Cycling Declaration will set a particular ambition, but across the Green Deal, the mobility transition, across so many places, you will know that cycling has its own ambition, but ambition for policymakers that we must have more cycling. Data. Why do we count things? We count things for change. But equally, we're now recognizing both, and there's a lot of words here, they're the Commission's words, how we monitor sumps. We actually have to know what's happening. Can our mobility services deliver? Can our modal shares change? Can we move forward? And I'm delighted that this project has been supported by our own data and IT-oriented project, which is called Megabits, which really seeks to change the game in the way cities use smart tools for cycling. Our colleagues at Flucto and even the bike share community, through the creators of the general bike share feed, are proving and breaking new technical ground, doing things that enable us for the first time, you'll see in this webinar, to measure in a different way. And I'm grateful to those colleagues because they provide such leadership in how we do this. And it enables us to take part in European initiatives like the Federated Access Points, who are trying to bring all countries together to standardize data. And I genuinely believe bike share today is breaking new ground. And lastly, just benchmarking. What does benchmarking let you do? Benchmarking enables you to compare. But we don't want to just use the numbers. What we want today is to start a conversation between cities about how bike share can work better and work best, and to share that, but with data as a focus. Because when we look at how do you assess bike share, there's a lot of historical discussions, current discussions. How much should we use e-bikes? What's the importance of the different models? What about the usage of the bikes? But what joins bike sharing to this ambition of the European Commission is one simple thing. It's trips. Trips we can replace, trips we can provide, trips that bring the whole thing together. So in this benchmarking study, we've decided through our work to say, let's really focus on delivering through bike share at a citywide level to use as the basis for our benchmarking study. So ambition, data, benchmarking. Now, what you really came for, of course, was the results and the league tables. So let me not hang around. We've looked at 148 European cities, recognized as being part of climate neutral cities movement, or 100 or the 10T urban nodes. That covers 95 million European cities citizens in just those 148. But we picked those because they're a special focus group for the European Commission, but we think also they should be exemplars in this way of working. And when we opened that up, let me tell you what we did. We actually looked at the figures. 21 had no bike share. 50, we can look at how many bikes they've got, but they don't meet modern standards in disclosure. But fortunately, we're able to say 78 cities gave us pretty comprehensive trip data, so we can actually talk about bike share trips in an open source way and actually do a benchmarking exercise. So I think we can look at it already that this is not a localized discussion. This is a multi-million people discussion about provision of a form of public transport. And here it is. Here's your league table. What they cry, what is it? It's trips relative to population. And before we disclose the kind of scores, I think what's most important that we see is really the shape of the curve. When cities lead on this, they really lead. The dramatic breakaway group in red on the left, which you'll see repeated many times, and then the solid, shall we call them middle ground, but a long tail. And when we do benchmarking, we say, is it possible for everybody to get to the middle level? Is it possible for everybody to get to the top quartile? And the top quartile, in this case, we've taken a top 10, set your benchmarks. And our congratulations, Paris and Bordeaux and Antwerp down to Milan, provide bike share as public transport in our measurable way better than anybody else in our sample, and set standards and set aspirations. So we can say to every city in Europe, it's entirely reasonable that you should be aiming to get 15 trips for every 1,000 people in your city every day. If you're ambitious, you could be heading for 40. And if we're really ambitious, we're hoping the leading cities might be heading up 50, 60 or more. But now we can give you a measurable outcome for your bike share work. And I guess you've all been waiting for this, but let's have a look. I'm going to go quiet for a few seconds because now you're desperately looking to see where your city is on that list. Champions League on the left. Well, maybe not Champions League on the right. With a note that those cities in orange, we couldn't get complete data. So there's actually, the first thing you could do to improve your score would be to actually make your bike share data more available. But here's the reality of the 77 cities. Now, in the bike share world, people have long ranked other things. Are there enough bikes, enough bike usage? We've actually looked at a lot of other things. We've looked at, are there e-bikes? Is there docking? What are the different? And you'll find those in our report. But for today, just briefly, we pick out 2 indicators that we think tell the most complete story and also demonstrate the power of benchmarking. And I'm going to start with the number of bikes in a city. Again, a league table, but different cities. You can see the overall top 10 highlighted in red again, but other cities break in with very large fleets relative to their population, and perhaps, and so strangely, almost a kind of breakaway group. The bottom 30 of our sample, whose bike sharing is just extraordinarily low. But what we can already say is if you want to be a leading city, you need 35 bikes per head of population, because that's what it takes to break into the very highest level. And congratulations, we have some leaders, and they are different. Bordeaux and Grenoble and others, the really large fleets, large density of bikes. No surprise that Paris is on that table and some of the others. But equally, other cities have got a lot of bikes out there. And that, again, enables us to ask really interesting questions about how they do that. And one of the tricks of the benchmarking has been we took every single indicator and started comparing them. So we look at headline trips indicator, and we ask ourselves, how does that compare? Does the number of bikes make a difference? And there's clearly a correlation to some extent. But for the longer term, interesting. Some people seem to be beating the trend. They're getting a higher number of trips with a relatively smaller fleet. And I've just put some city names in here for examples, which means that when you want to improve your scheme, perhaps you go and you talk to those cities and they form a benchmarking group for who gets good results in that way. Equally, you might ask the question why some of the cities with very large fleets don't generate the trips. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a conscious thing. It's about city coverage and it makes sure there's a bike on every corner. But it enables the conversation to say what does happen, what doesn't happen. So it isn't just about the leaders on the table. It's also about the conversation that we have. And certainly in the bike share world, the number one indicator people have used, and certainly commercially, talking to our members, bike usage, i.e. the rate at which bikes are used, can make the difference whether a scheme survives or not. It makes a difference to your revenue streams. It makes a difference to your understanding. But we don't want 10 bikes that are in constant use. We might need 1,000 bikes or 100 bikes. So that is no longer the headline indicator that we recommend. We recommend total trips. But on bike usage, really, really interesting to see in our city trips analysis that are trips per bike per day. Again, we can draw a line. To be a top performing city, you need over 2 trips per bike per day. But what does happen down the bottom with a bike share fleet that only is used less than once every 2 or 3 days? Is that a tourism bike? Is it planned that way? And is this break point of 2 trips per bike per day mean 1 out, 1 return per bike? Some interesting conversations, but we need to talk to the people who do it really well. And here you can see new names appearing in Bilbao and Karlsruhe and Dresden that have come onto Lisbon, coming onto this list. Interesting to see a strong presence of German cities with highly utilized bikes, presumably getting good commercial value from their fleets. And again, benchmarking tells us, just take a look at that. Take a look at that and how it compares to other indicators. And what an interesting group. Again, on the left, maybe people breaking the mold. They're getting quite a lot of trips without their bikes being used every day or being used constantly 5, 6, 7 times. But equally, the other group to the bottom right, what's going on here? These bikes are intensively used. They fit the model for a successful bike scheme. Perhaps the scheme's not big enough. Perhaps operationally, it could be expanded. But for those cities that would previously perhaps regard themselves as successful, we want to set a new ambition, which is are you generating trips across your whole population? Not just the bikes you have being used a lot. So, to conclude, it's a shared ambition set by the number of trips relative to its size that a city can generate. An ambition. Why shouldn't every city in Europe at least aspire to get around 12 trips per head of population from its bike share scheme? If you don't getting that, is that a strategy? Is that a reason? But an understanding that you can provide a formidable, close proximity cycling to your citizens. If we're really going for the ambition, can we all break into this kind of higher group and looking at this, we'd say 19 trips, and we actually measured it. If those cities did that, 600 million trips a year, 200,000 of extra bikes could be afforded, and 250,000 tons of CO2 saved per year. That's an ambition for transport systems, but we can measure it, we can show it, we can count it, and we can examine it, and we can share it. I think that's an amazing basis for a conversation for all the factors on the screen, why you might have successful or not successful bike share. But above all else, we hope that what we do today starts a conversation. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Kevin, for all this explanation. I hope we have some of the cities that were ranked with us, so don't hesitate to say that you're there and to comment on your results. And I will right away ask a few questions. I will start with Isabel. Isabel, you're representing the European Commission here with us. This CIE benchmarking study shows that bike sharing can deliver, especially in terms of decarbonizing Europe. Now, the Commission's proposal for an EU interinstitutional declaration on cycling is coming up soon. Will bike sharing be part of this strategy? Do you think this benchmarking could act as a valuable tool so that bike sharing could be rolled out in every European city? And most importantly, what we would like to know, like, will there be funds available to help the cities?
You have plenty of questions to me. So on the proposal for a declaration, we are on a good path to have the declaration adopted on the 5th of October, so next week. And indeed, if you have a declaration on cycling, indeed, you need to have bike sharing schemes and services identified in the declaration. So I can say, yes, it will be part of it. Your second question was about, your third question was about funding. Yes. Actually, we have some funds available, of course, at EU level, but quite often we think that we have plenty of money at EU level. Well, it's not true, and it's just part of the public money available. And beside that, we are also trying, knowing that we have so many challenges and we do not have any EU funds. Quite often, we try to make, let's say, the ideas attractive for private financing. So we need to keep that in mind. Now, going back to EU funds, there are some funds available, and old funds, you know, that the ones that are known for, so they exist for, I don't remember when they started. For example, if we take the regional funds, there you see that the cities and the regions, they can manage, and they manage the funds, and they discuss with my colleagues of DG Regio. And so some schemes could be discussed as part of this future, as part of the plan. So now we are in the middle of the financial period. So I think that now for them it's a bit too late to be included, but for sure for the next financial period, it will be important to make the regions and the member states aware of the needs of the cities when it comes to sustainable urban mobility and the topic of today, the added value of bike sharing. Of course, we have other funds, and we know, and I do not have the figures with me, but we know that that some member states have used the recovery funds to fund some cycling projects, maybe more infrastructure projects, but it has been used like that. So we have plenty other funds, and another one will come later, the social climate fund. What I would like to say is that there are different kind of EU funds with different criteria, and so selection criteria, different management. So there is no one answer, but my message to you would be, don't look at EU money because we don't have a lot. We don't have a lot. So please reflect in a global way, in an holistic way. That would be better, because really, when we see how much a city needs to be decarbonized, they need a huge amount of funds, and by no means the EU funds will be sufficient. So we need national public funds, we need private funding, private financing. So we need to have projects which are well described, well mature enough, and quite often needs to be bankable, but that's another topic.
Thank you so much, Isabelle. We'll probably go further into how to get some money from the EU, and it's interesting what you just said about it's not only the EU that should finance bike sharing. But before we go back to that, I would like to go to turn to Anna Utunen, because you're advisor for the climate neutral city. So maybe you could remind us who are those cities and what is the targets, and do you think this bike share study could help them in order to decarbonize the transport, because this is one of the biggest challenges that they have, right?
Thanks, Caroline. I'm very happy to. You can also just take the next slide already. Yeah, well, within the EU mission on climate neutral and smart cities, we have altogether 112 cities. So I might not be able to mention all of them by name. And I also know that within the benchmarking study, you have acknowledged the 100 that are actually within the EU, which is great. And it's definitely amazing to see that a lot of the mission cities are also within the top ranking cities of the benchmarking study. But I wanted to shed a little bit light on the broader topic of decarbonizing the transport and the shared ambition that we have within the city's mission, which is climate neutrality by 2030. We provide a tool and a process, the Climate City Contract for the mission cities, where they should consider what are the commitments they need, what kind of actions they need, and what kind of investments they need in order to achieve climate neutrality by 2030. And maybe also to build on what Isabelle was saying, that the municipality really cannot achieve this alone. So also within the city's mission, there is the added focus on multi-level governance, investment planning, and new partnerships. And I think bike sharing really has a great potential on this, creating new models for funding and improving the service, one city by one city. We also encourage the cities to think about portfolio of actions instead of single actions. We encourage them to think like, what has to change in order to reach climate neutrality? Who do we need for the transformation? What are the capabilities we need? In case of bike sharing, it could be, for instance, understanding of the technical aspects of a bike share process, what kind of investments and funding models we could create, and what are the technologies that we need to enable the transformation. Of course, what is the role of social innovation, and also how and if we should change regulation and our governance models to improve and enable the transformation? And of course, how do we ensure a just transition? And yeah, I mean, I guess all we here in the room know that transport sector is proving to be the most tricky one, also for the 100 mission cities. And I think, yeah, I mean, cycling and bike sharing has a great potential and role in the mix of actions. But of course, it's not a single standing action. And we need to think about multimodality, infrastructure, and all the other conditions that also need to be in favor of low emission transport modes, which also contribute again to the trip generation. So I really think that this benchmarking study can be a very interesting one for our mission cities, also for peer-to-peer learning, not only to learn from the ones that are scoring very high on the study, but also for those that are like at the moment, for instance, scoring a little bit lower. Maybe they share also other challenges in the city that they could discuss and learn from each other.
Thank you so much, Anna. That's exactly what the study is all about, is not judge the city, but encourage them to collaborate and say, oh, you're doing great on that part. How did you do? And to encourage them to collaborate. And we'll hear soon, Christian, because here as expert, of course, we have so many clues on what you should do in order to improve your bike share system. But the first thing is to ask the city and to encourage the discussion. And actually, we have a representative of a city with us. We have Christophe de Vogel from Brussels region, and you actually just released a tender and you're thinking about a second tender. And we would like to ask you, how do you see a good bike sharing and how it could encourage people who don't have bikes to actually ride bikes in the future? And also, as you're thinking about your the future of your bike share system, how a study like this one could help you in order to take a decision, and will Brussels be better ranked next year, maybe?
Yeah, we will see. Thank you, Caroline. Before answering your question, I prepared 2 slides to just give you the context of cycling in Brussels. So that's just a presentation. Then the next slide would be better. Yeah. So as you can see on the slide, our latest numbers for the modal split in Brussels date back to 2010. So it's quite long, and we are pretty excited that we have just new numbers since the month of June, and they are pretty encouraging. So as you can see, the car has decreased. The car usage, both as a driver or as a passenger, has decreased from 38.5% to 27.5%, and simultaneously, walking and cycling have increased by respectively 4% and 5%. So we have now reached an honorable number, I would say. About 9% of the trips in Brussels are done by bike, which is quite good. On my next slide, however, I want to highlight something like a paradox. We observe that people seems to own a bike before actually cycling and actually riding a bike. So on the diagram here, you can see on the left column the modal split of people owning an electric bike, and then in the middle, people having a normal bike, and on the right hand side, the people not owning a bike. And you can see that the modal share are very different, and the people owning an electric bike, they are usually also from an household with a higher income. They cycle a lot, and people not having a bike, usually they have low income and they don't cycle at all. And that's surprising, because cycling is quite cheap, and if you have a bike sharing system in place in your city, as it is in Brussels, it should be used by those people. But we can see that bike sharing has not had a big impact on the rising of bicycles in Brussels, and only 4.6% of the residents have an abonnement to a service of bike sharing. And even in that quite low number, 3/4 of these people own their own bikes. So it's really a strange thing that people not having a bike are not riding even for a bike sharing system. And that's where I think is the challenge. Is that's your question. How can we make these people cycling? And the benchmark can be useful for us. As we can see, we are not bad at all in the number of bicycles. I think we are 5th, which is great. But the indicator that is very bad for us is the number of trips per bike per day. And that's what we have to increase. And it's not good for the public bike sharing system, but also for the private ones with the free floating bikes. So I think those two questions should be taken separately. For the private operators, they've been in Brussels since summer of 2017 and coming really in a big numbers in 21, 22. But already in 2018, we took a law, a decree, which wanted to just give a framework for all micromobility, meaning e-steps, e-bikes, and also mopeds and cargo bikes and that kind of things. And we made it for an open market with quite few constraints for the operators. It was just a license-based system. And what we see is that it's not working so good because we attracted a lot of operators who came with a huge number of vehicles. We have currently 20,000 e-steps on the streets and 4,000 e-bikes. And actually, there are too much operators, too much vehicles, and it's not profitable for them. And they are asking for us to regulate a little bit more. And that's why we took a new decree this year, and we just launched what you said, a tender. It's not a tender, it's actually a call for operators for our new license system. When we will restrain the number of license, it will be only 2 licenses for e-steps with only 4,000 vehicles per license, 3 licenses for bikes with 2,500 bikes per license, 2 licenses for mopeds, 2 licenses for cargo bikes with 150 bikes per license. And among the other change, they will be obliged to park in a drop zone in a virtual hub, but also the operators will be evaluated every year. So we can change the numbers. Maybe we can say you are not allowed anymore because you are not good enough, your usage is too low, but you are good, and we can rise maybe your number of bicycles. But this doesn't solve the problem of mobility poverty, which is important for us and for the EU, because all these services are quite expensive. That's where the public bike sharing system can come to help. And as you know, our public system Velo is coming to an end in 2026. And we are currently leading a study to see what we will do next. We have been benchmarking the cities. We have been visiting 5 cities in depth. We have learned a lot of things. The report is not done yet, but we learned a lot of things. And now we will start the phase of writing some scenarios, very different scenarios, where we can see as a bike sharing normal system, but maybe also long-term renting, as Paris and Ile-de-France is doing with Veligo, or maybe other options like a special program for disadvantaged people, giving them training and for how to ride a bike and also a bike. We still don't know. We are in the phase of writing down these scenarios, and hopefully we will have a choice between those scenarios, a political choice by the end of the year, and we will select one scenario and maybe go further. So the benchmarking has been really helpful, and we hope that next year we will be maybe a bit better in the ranking.
Thank you, Christophe. We're cross finger for you, and it was very interesting that your vision between private and public model, and how do they actually complete each other? How do they actually probably target different public? We might have time to come back on that. Thank you so much. I will turn now to Andrea. Andrea, you're representing police. Police gathers several cities. To which extent is this kind of city by city benchmarking valuable according to you? And could police take it and use it to help the cities that you represent to improve their own scheme?
Hi, Caroline. Yeah, thank you very much. So as a network of cities and regions working for sustainable mobility innovation, we focus a lot in a knowledge sharing culture. So having these and similar benchmarking studies brings a solid base for police work and the effort of our members. This type of studies, they provide a big picture towards cities with the easy to find information when we are advocating for the advancements of sustainable modes in an European level. But despite the great value of the study, in making more evident the potential that bike sharing can have for Europe, either in decreasing emissions, in allowing for behavior change, in innovation, and in increasing the share of active modes, for cities, it is also important that the study is not taken too strictly or is not detached for their own context. Because, well, the study, however, it offers an entry door to our members and other cities to assess their bike sharing schemes and also their cycling policies and measures. So either if they're ranking high or low in the benchmarking. So moving away from the ranking or the big picture, what are the other aspects and characteristics of the city, of the users, of the infrastructure and policies that are justifying the numbers that they're ranking? So from the commonalities to the specificities, the cities can explore what is working, what can work better, what is not working. The cities can look to others for learnings, for support, for exchange. So looking at the study is an opportunity for cities to move from this restrictive, reactive approach to a proactive one that is towards shared modes for sustainability and intermodality improvements. So it's also an opportunity to proactively create coherence between regulatory elements. So talking about the legal, the physical, and the financial side. So we can have bike schemes aligned with infrastructure and with policies. This study will be a useful tool for police while we support cities first to understand where they are and why, and then in taking the necessary steps in improving their bike sharing schemes along with their bike and active travel culture. So looking at others is not only about blind comparisons, it's a way to understand challenges and opportunities, to identify what needs to be done both in the local and in the European level. And this is core to police work. And we need tools like this study, like this bike sharing benchmarking to continue to do so. And moreover, we see also a study the relevance of having EU standardization and regulation on data sharing availability for cycling. This is very important. Police also see the potential for further studies that will help us understand other aspects of bike sharing schemes and the impacts that they can have in cities and their mobility systems. So Christophe touched upon something now very interesting. So when we're considering pricing and users, is pricing a key factor for bike sharing in some contexts? Some of these high-performing schemes, are they reaching diverse users? Are they overlooking any group? Are they accessible and equitable? And in the relationship with the public space, are some of these bike sharing schemes improving the public space or creating new conflicts or undesirable side effects? Also the safety side of it, how is this being tackled? So these questions, they are more close to the specificities of some contexts, but they're also necessary to boost the potential of bike sharing schemes. And for us to have this proactive, positive approach that will embrace this potential of bike sharing throughout Europe.
Thank you so much, Andrea. It's very enthusiastic. Actually, you have an ally to help your cities know how to work all this better. It's our bike share expert group, and I will turn to Christian. How is this benchmarking valuable to the industry? How can cities use it to improve performance? And what are the key recommendations that we collectively as bike share expert group can give to the cities?
Thank you, Carolyn, a lot. And yeah, first off, I would just like to congratulate the CIE team for coming up with this benchmarking study. It's probably one of the most original studies that we've seen within the industry in years, really. The concept of trips per bike per 1,000 inhabitants per day is actually quite an interesting metric in order to measure the amount of ridership in a city. So that has already been useful for the industry, I would say, answering your first question. I think in terms of the results, there aren't many surprises for a lot of the operators that are in this bike share expert group that we're all collaborating in. They know what the numbers are. We're mostly the ones that are providing them, curating the systems on a daily basis for the citizens as well. So these numbers come as no surprise. Reason why we have come up with a series of recommendations as the bike share industry for the cities to be able to do better, help the operators out with their day-to-day business, and essentially make a successful bike share system. So perhaps there is a slide there, perhaps not. There it is. So in order to make the recommendations of the industry easy to remember, we've created a little acronym that is called the beep beep recommendations for all cities to remember perhaps what to do next time they're building a bike share scheme. These are the first 3 beeps that I'll be talking about, and then what you can do throughout your operation as well to increase ridership, and at the end of the day have a system that is used, as Christoph was mentioning earlier. So the first point is build bike-friendly infrastructure. So right now we have seen in the history of bike share systems that building bike lanes, bike parking, and essentially infrastructure that is useful for cycling is always something that goes hand in hand with bike sharing. Bike sharing has been treated historically as well, perhaps wrongly, as infrastructure as well, in order to create more cycling culture in the cities. So this is, at the end of the day, a part of our industry, an integral part to build infrastructure that accompanies cycling as in order to build a proper culture. Second one is invest in bike sharing. If you believe it is a public service, well, it is perhaps the moment to invest in it properly. As Isabel was mentioning, there are European funds available. We need more national commitment, regional as well. But there are out there several packages that are up for the cities to go for and be able to finance or co-finance a bike share system. So funding is essential, as we know. Create as well supportive business models. There are situations where the business model in the end just ends up being completely impossible for the operator, just creating a situation where nobody's able to provide a proper system for the citizens. Grow the model and think about things like subsidies or tax benefits in your cities or your regions as well. There is a lot of these kind of situations in the car industry, tax benefits especially. So why not in the bike share industry for the users? And last but not least, plan properly. Use the data. The bike share industry, as we've seen here with this study, has it pretty much also. You can use it, ask the experts, make follow-up of the SLAs that have been done if your city is contracting a bike share system directly. And also have a look at what is the appropriate fleet size, mechanical versus e-bike, the spatial distribution that some of the people have been asking in the question section here as well. These are all essential for the success of a bike share system. And the experts are all here, and we're available for the cities to talk throughout the planning process before a bike share system kicks off. The second bit is basically for your operations. Before bringing more bikes, although it seems like in this study, well, there is a good quantity of bikes in Europe. I would like to ask an open question to everybody here. How many bikes or shared bikes can a city actually fit until we have a real modal shift from cars to bikes? Right now, we see in the industry that most of the cities are going for the minimum with a budget, which is fair, but we still haven't really seen the limit in bike share of what is it that is a good amount or an appropriate amount. Reason why we also like that in the study, there is a specific chart for total amount of bikes per inhabitant. So this is really good. Bring in more bikes, integrate. And this is, if you still believe that bike share is a public service, it should also probably be easy to step out of your public transit system and use bike share in, for example, multimodal digital transport services, ticketing integrations, but always please with an appropriate business model around these integrations as well. Make it easy access, make it affordable, simple, and communicate properly to the customers when you are integrating. And of course, right now with the European Commission being here as well, mobility hubs in Europe are being planned for. It seems like it's something that is taking off for the future, especially in regards to e-charging vehicles. So mobility hubs might be an interesting place to combine bike share services within your city. And last, I think this is the most important point for the industry that we wanted to put out, is provide practical service level agreements, also known as SLAs. Why? Because this is usually the place where a bike sharing system goes dead, unfortunately. So creating incentivizing SLAs where there's a collaboration between the suppliers of the bike share system, the operators, and the city is essential. The case studies where the city is collaborating in the establishment of the SLAs with the contractees are the best examples. It's about the goal, not the method. It's about getting people on bikes. It's not about just following up and giving penalties. Create quantifiable goals. Look at what can be achieved with a given budget. And overall, build SLAs towards operational efficiency and not killing the operator along the way. So these are the recommendations from the bike share industry for the cities in case you want to increase your positioning in this ranking, make it for the Champions League. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christian. It's very interesting, and of course, the first thing we can say to complete what you just said, ask us, operator, provider. We have so many different technologies, we have so many different business models that there must be one that will help you. Either you already have a scheme and you want to improve it, either you don't have one and you want to launch one. Don't hesitate to ask us and to do what actually Brussels told us that they're doing. Visit all the cities, ask all the cities, and you will most probably find the right the right secret sauce just for you, because it's a bit of all of this that will make your bike share scheme perform. Thank you so much, Christian. Now I will ask a few questions very quickly to the audience. Anybody can jump in and answer. First thing I wanted to ask, like, So what can we say to a city that is that got a poor ranking in our benchmark study? Who wants to answer? And just after, I will get a question from the audience. I don't know, maybe Christian, Andrea? Nobody?
Yes, maybe I can say something for the cities that are low in the rank. I don't think this is a matter of blaming and shaming, you know, like, oh, you're so poor. Don't take it that way. I think it's an opportunity to learn from others and see where you can grow with your bike sharing scheme, and how to align this with other measures and policies that you have in your city. So it's more of an opportunity to learn and expand than to feel overwhelmed by being low on the rank. And I think Brussels is a good example of this and what they're actually trying to do. So yeah, don't be discouraged. There's still room to grow.
Yeah, and
the other thing I would say,
yeah,
Caroline, on that is, frankly, find a friend, because in the ranking, you don't have to look at the people at the top. Look at comparable cities, comparable density, comparable bike ownership, comparable topography. Look at cities within the same country. I mean, we have extraordinary differences. You know, we have people from cities from Spain in the top 10 and in the bottom 10. We have cities across that space, and the whole point about benchmarking, it actually enables you to say, okay, so how come you get more trips per bike than me? So how come you do this? And we have a lot of other indicators in the report, I would add. You know, you can look at which cities are using e-bikes, which docking and parking methods you use. So, and we've looked at many other data sets and couldn't necessarily prove a trend. So don't hesitate to ask us. But the single most important takeaway from benchmarking is kind of ask a friend. And obviously Polis Network and Net Zero Cities and other places can go and find friends to have that conversation, and even say the operators will know who does that. You know, who's your next step up? You don't leap to the top, but you leap to the next step up.
Thank you so much. I have two other topics for two other questions. First is, how do we make sure that bike sharing is completing and not competing with bike ownership? And how was it actually taking into account somehow, Kevin, in the study? We could look at the example of Antwerp that we mentioned in the study, which actually rank really well, which is in two of our tops, but has very good bike ownership. So it is possible. It doesn't actually compete.
And Antwerp was the outstanding example of, you know, Flanders being one of the really highest bike ownership regions in effectively the world. And yet Antwerp achieves extraordinary numbers, which I think would be a big surprise to many people in the Netherlands and Denmark, for example. So I think that we found that to be quite groundbreaking. I'm sure others, Christophe has raised the point for Brussels, but others may have comments in other cities. But within the study, we particularly struck by Antwerp's results.
Another question that always the cities are always asking themselves: what is the relation between private model and public funded model, and are all the cities that were studied subsidized or not?
I cannot answer to the last question, but in regards to if a bike share system is completing or competing with private ownership, I think it has been shown study upon study that just the visual effect of having a bike share has had an effect on the change of culture. You don't have to look further than just like the Velib system of Paris, Beijing, Barcelona, London Cycle Hire, systems that have been flagships for the cultural shift in Europe back in the 2000s, where it was only the Netherlands and Denmark that was really cycling in Europe. So throughout these 20 years, Europe has changed a lot towards cycling culture. It's still growing, and bike share has been there all along, right? And I think it's very important to think of bike share as a complement of public transport, not a competitor of private ridership or private cycle ownership. I mean, you wouldn't, nobody ever questioned the taxi service when the cars took over our streets, right? It's complementary services. So this is the same case. Antwerp is an excellent example of how you can combine it. And there are more examples out there. One very important factor I think that we've seen out there is that you make the bike share system affordable and in comparison to the rest of the public transport services, right? Like you cannot make your bike share service super expensive. At the end of the day, it has to be competitive with the rest. And for that reason, you also need to fund it because none of the public transport systems are making a humongous amount of money for the operators, right? So this is the mental shift that needs to change in the cities, especially.
Thank you, Kristen. This is actually linking another question regarding like how did we actually took in account the culture of the different country. I guess Kevin, you can answer this one. It was not possible to take this into account, but by analyzing it, yeah, we can read through it.
Yeah, whether bike culture actually means again mode share as a cross indicator of ownership. We've got so many more things we can do with this. I think the really important thing to say today is this was something in many expert groups, and I sit in the EU Urban Mobility Expert Group, for example. At various conversations, I think many people believe even this study couldn't be done. And so, or that this kind of thing could exist. We probably, and through the Megabits project, we're looking at, how do we calculate standardized mode shares? How do we capture bicycle use? How do we do other things? And it's going to be super exciting to see where this goes. I would much rather say, can we treat this as a kickoff? And then seeing the chat and hearing the arguments, yeah, what about social profile in a city? What about the different business models? Yeah, how do you count culture? Fascinating, but I mean, we can do those things. And I see Anna nodding, it's the same on attitudes to solar power, or attitude to waste, attitude to so many other things. I think we'd love to try. I mean, I'd love to feel that we could try. I'm just excited that we've set this kind of bicycle rolling, because first of all, I will come back to saying trips.
Yeah.
In every case, someone else can come along and tell us, like Christoph did, does this constitute substitution of walking trips or cycling trips or adding to mobility trips? Fine, but you've actually got to count all the trips. And we have to start somewhere, and I hope we move cycling forward a bit today with this work. Yeah.
What last very quick question, like, did you ever seen or because we haven't talked about a third party, which are the companies, those bike sharing run by companies could be a good complement to public bike share? And
we cannot say that, because it takes us too close to an examination of the different business models and the different licensing models of individual cities. I think cities must look at their own mix and their own structure and see whether public, private, floating, docks, subsidized, non-subsidized, are delivering. And as I said, go find a friend. But I don't think we're in a position to start cross-checking, or we will run into horrible competition issues. So that does set a limitation to what CIE could do. But if there are any academics or others out there or Polis or others want to come and kind of play along in the game, then let's introduce other actors into this. This is a methodology that we'd love to see used.
Yeah, could be part of the mix, but it's your choice to decide. It's I would say it's kind of the same thing with e-bikes. We have mentioned in the study that it doesn't actually show, but we as bike share expert kind of tend to see an evolution toward a majority of e-bikes because they tend to be able to do more trips, etc. But that's also something you have to look at according to the topography and the type of cities you want to develop bike sharing. We are running out of time. Does anybody has a last comment? No, I take that for a no. Thank you very much, all of you, to have been with us. The study is still embargoed until tomorrow, 8:30. You will all receive it. If you have registered to this webinar, you will receive the full study with all the graphs that Kevin has just shown. Don't hesitate to share those widely on social media with your colleagues, etc. And we at CIE and at Bike Share Expert Group are here to discuss further with you the results of that study. Thank you very much to all of you to have been with us today to discover that benchmarking study in 148 cities in Europe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. I hope it was interesting to all of you.